Hey everyone, welcome to Movie Marathon's HQ, where we do movie marathons connected to new releases and where we enjoy and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon, where we are watching one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026. Today we are discussing the Avengers Infinity War. Released in 2018 and directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, this is the culmination of 10 years of movies, lots of storytelling, and the biggest cinematic event in my lifetime to that point. Overall, I really love this movie. This is my favorite MCU movie of all time. I know there's a lot of movies in the MCU that I do love, but this one is number one. I just think that just about everything in this movie works to perfection. It somehow pulls together nearly every significant thread in the MCU that we had seen to this point. It also introduces a very compelling villain, it provides exceptional action, and it culminates in a thrilling ending. For positives, I think just about everything in this movie is a positive. It's hard to narrow down any because I think it's just so good from top to bottom. But some that I'll highlight specifically are the story. I think the screenwriters Marcus and McFeely did an incredible job pulling together so many different plot lines and making them work. I think the characters and the character interactions are the best they've ever been. Every character is true to himself or herself, and the way that these characters interact with one another in new ways is such a delight. Thanos as a villain is the best MCU villain there's been, so we'll talk about him. I think the score by Alan Silvestri is phenomenal. The visual effects of all the characters are terrific, as one would expect. And I really like the ending. I just think it's phenomenal that the bad guy wins. It's a brutal ending. It's very memorable and heartbreaking, and I think it's great that they pulled that off. And then for negatives, I really only have two things. The Children of Thanos characters are forgettable, and while I do really like the score in this movie, there's one part, I have to give a caveat to one part of the score that takes me out of the movie every time. Other than that, it's pretty much all positives. Spoiler alert for Avengers Infinity War. So the first positive is just the story. Marcus and McFeely had written a number of projects in the MCU prior to this point, but then they were given the task of writing a story for Infinity War and for Endgame. And I've read that their plan was they wrote both stories and kind of they conceived of both stories at the same time. And then in order to decide who would survive into Endgame, they had to figure out what the story for Endgame was going to be and keep only those characters alive and then work backwards into Infinity War. And I think that's very clever. I think the story of this movie ties in at least Thor Ragnarok, Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War, Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man Homecoming, and kind of where all of those main characters left off. They get pulled into the story in Infinity War in a way that is natural and makes sense. And I think it's really fulfilling. It's quite a task to pull together 10 years of storytelling after all of these movies and all of these characters and things that have gone on. But I think Marcus and McFeely knocked it out of the park with Infinity War. Next, the characters and the character interactions are just so much fun. We had seen a lot of these disparate characters brought together. In the first Avengers movie, we get the original 6 Avengers. In Age of Ultron, we get 3 main new Avengers and a little bit more time with some of the side characters. Captain America Civil War brought together the 2 teams of all these characters to battle it out. And here in Infinity War, we get just about all of the Earth-based heroes, and we bring in the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's just such a delight to see all of these different character interactions and their histories and their preferences and their powers and their skill sets and personalities all clashing together. The directors, Joe and Anthony Russo, once mentioned that they view this as a very combustible group, which I think is such a great description of all of these characters being put together, and you don't know what's going to blow up and how. So I think it's such a delight. My favorite grouping is Thor with the Guardians of the Galaxy. I think they work really well and play off of each other. Thor is really a space-based hero if you think about it. And it's here that one of my favorite lines in the MCU is delivered. Thor is telling the Guardians of the Galaxy that they need to go to Nidavellir, which is where he can get a Thanos destroying axe made by Yitu the dwarf. When he says Nidavellir, um, Rocket says that's a made up word, and Thor responds, all words are made up. And it's so simple, but I think that is a brilliant line. All words are made up. And he's right. Every word that's ever been used by humans is made up. It's also funny that Chris Hemsworth mispronounces Nidavellir every time. He calls it Nidavellir, and if you listen closely, he pronounces wrong every time. But who cares? It's a lot of fun, and I just think the character interactions in Infinity War are top notch. I also want to mention, as a positive, the villain Thanos. I think he's the best villain we've had in the MCU. Even though his actions are reprehensible, his motivations are clearly explained in such a way that even though we can't morally and responsibly accept his viewpoint, we do understand what he means. The way that he explains what he's doing and has been doing for many, many years makes sense. Although he's certainly villainous and the things he does to his adopted daughters, Gamora and Nebula, are terrible, you do understand that he's a person with a mission and willpower to see it through. I also think his design is awesome. In the comics, he's a big purple alien scary dude, and I think they translated that very well to the screen. Even his ruffled chin, which could look very silly, somehow kind of works. I think Josh Brolin as the voice actor and the performance capture actor actually does a very good job bringing some humanity to this alien creature. And he just does some awesome things in his quest. He makes personal sacrifices that we can understand. And I think my favorite thing that Thanos does is during the battle on Titan with Doctor Strange and with Tony Stark. He uses the Infinity Gauntlet to absorb all the fire from the explosives that Iron Man sends to him. He kind of captures them all into some kind of a thing and does like a fire blast from his gauntlet. And I think that's the coolest looking thing. But his fight with Doctor Strange on Titan is also awesome. I should have mentioned that in some of the visual effects are just stunning in that part. But I think Thanos does such a great job. And we'll get to the ending, but he's just so compelling and so interesting as a character that was introduced almost entirely in Infinity War. Next, the score in Infinity War is a lot of fun. It's done by Alan Silvestri, who has done some remarkable scores throughout his career, and he's even done some Avengers and MCU scores. I really love it, especially with a few transitions that are cued by the music. Towards the beginning of the movie, Tony Stark and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man get pulled up into the donut spaceship, and Bruce Banner and Wong are left there on Earth. And Wong is going to go back to the Sanctum Sanctorum, and he asks Bruce what he's going to do, and he says he's going to make a call. And then he pulls out the phone that was given to Tony by Steve Rogers at the end of Civil War, and the musical cue in the background cuts to a song called Rubber Band Man, and as the opening notes play with no fanfare, just the notes of the song, as an audience member, you can cue into Guardians of the Galaxy. So before you see them, you hear the cue, which hasn't been connected with the Guardians before, but just that musical cue that's put into the score soundtrack makes you realize we're going to see the Guardians, and then sure enough, it cuts to the Guardians of the Galaxy in their ship, the Benatar. It's so awesome. There's another part a little bit later in the movie where Captain America is talking about where they'll need to take Vision, and they ask him, well, where are we going to take him? And Cap says, I know a place. And in the musical score, we start hearing the drums from the Black Panther score. So before we cut to Wakanda, we hear those drums and we hear the lead up into it. Then we smash cut to Panther statue in Wakanda, where the Black Panther score plays. It's just so expertly done, where we get the main Avengers theme, we get Black Panther themes. We get Spider-Man themes and Thor themes, and it's all woven into the overall score that just paints a picture of nostalgia, of the great memories we've had in the 10 years exploring the MCU as a film universe that's harkened back to throughout the score by Alan Silvestri. So it's really a great score. The visual effects are also very well done. I can't nitpick many things. I think it all looks really good. There's lots of characters that are clearly visual effects and lots of stunts that have a lot of visual effects, but it blends seamlessly and does a great job building this story in Infinity War. And then finally, the ending. I had read the Infinity Gauntlet comic book previous to seeing this movie, so I knew that his snap was successful in the comics, but still there was a part of me that thought, no way they're going to actually snap away half of characters in existence. And so as we get towards the end of the movie, it feels like the Avengers are going to win. They've got some hope. They've got all these things on their side. But then as the story gets together and Thanos is an unstoppable force, we get to the point where he's about to get the stone from Vision, but then Wanda destroys it. So for just a brief moment, we think the Avengers have won and they've stopped him. But of course, Thanos had already acquired the Time Stone. He turned back time, brought the stone back, and was able to collect it. Even when Thor hits him with Stormbreaker and it seems like the heroes have won, he still is able to snap. I just think it's such a bold move to let the villain win in such a devastating way. It's brutal, especially when Peter Parker gets snapped away and feels it coming because of his spider sense. All of the characters being dusted right in front of the eyes of their best friends and loved ones is brutal. And the movie ends on just such a sour and depressing note where the Avengers lost and Thanos won. I just think, I know that it was there in the comics and all that they were doing was adapting the comics, but it's still just so bold to have the stakes be so high that when the heroes lose, they really lose, compared to in Captain America Civil War, which was also called War, there's really no casualties that are long standing, where here in Infinity War, we definitely have casualties, and I love that. And for negatives, there's really not a lot. I would mention that the children of Thanos characters are forgettable. In the comics, they're not much cooler, but they feel a bit more present in the comic book run. But the characters are Ebony Maw, Cull Obsidian, Proxima Midnight, and Corvus Glaive. Those are awesome names for villains, and it makes sense that Thanos has some henchmen that he can send off into the corners of the world to do his bidding in his quest. They look good, and they all look kind of different from one another, but they're just forgettable. They don't do a whole ton, and they're there just to be kind of boss-level bad guys. So they're not the worst, they're just forgettable, so I would consider that to be a negative. And finally, while I do love the score in this movie, there's one part that I think is cheesy. It's right at the beginning of the movie where Thanos and the children of Thanos are attacking the Statesman, which is carrying all of the Asgardians. And Thanos is talking with Thor and Loki reminds him that we have a Hulk, which is a callback to the first Avengers movie. And Hulk and Thanos fight, which is a pretty cool fight, and Thanos beats him pretty quickly. The score is great up until that point, and then Thanos is able to pick up the Jade Giant, and he kind of slams him like a wrestling move on the ground. And then right then, the score gives us a dun dun dun. I just think that's cheesy. I get it that they're showing this is the villain. There's the classic dun 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 sound, so you know this is the villain. I just don't think that was necessary. We knew he was the villain from the second he showed up on screen and as the characters talked about him. So I think that part of the score is a little bit silly and cheesy, so I would have preferred to not have that musical cue there. But otherwise, it's a fine score. Now, how might Avengers Infinity War connect to Avengers Doomsday? Well, first, Joe and Anthony Russo, who directed this movie, will direct Avengers Doomsday. And one half of the screenwriting duo will return for Doomsday. Stephen McFeely will be part of the writing team for Doomsday, though Marcus has not returned. And then many of the characters in Infinity War will appear again in Doomsday. So, including but not limited to Thor, Loki, although it's the Loki from the Disney Plus series, not the Loki from the mainline MCU, Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson, Shuri, M'Baku, Bucky Barnes will all return in their roles, and Robert Downey Jr. will return, but as Victor Von Doom. Characters who are in this movie but not returning are Doctor Strange, Wong, Bruce Banner, Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, and War Machine and Okoye. While they're in Infinity War, they will not be in Doomsday. Online, I have heard a few people say that Doctor Doom has not had any build-up in the MCU compared to Thanos, who had all of this build-up in the MCU prior to Infinity War. As I've investigated that claim, really, here's all that I can find. We see Thanos at the post-credit scene of the original Avengers movie, and we see him turn towards the camera. And we realize that he was the one behind the attack in New York. We also see him having a role in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, where he's the one giving orders to Ronan the Accuser, and we hear more about him through Gamora and Nebula in that movie. We also see Thanos in the post-credit scene of Age of Ultron, where he sort of grabs a gauntlet from some kind of a chamber, even though that's retconned here in Infinity War when we learn how he actually got the gauntlet. But really, that's all that we had for Thanos prior to Infinity War, so he didn't have that much build-up. However, I will concede that while Thanos did not have much of a build-up in the MCU prior to Infinity War, the Infinity Stones did. We knew from the comics that Thanos would be going after the Infinity Stones, and at this point we had seen the Reality Stone in Thor: The Dark World, and there was also mention of the Tesseract being the Space Stone. We saw the Power Stone in Guardians of the Galaxy, we saw the Mind Stone in Age of Ultron, and we saw the Time Stone in Doctor Strange. Also in Age of Ultron, we had Thor go on his little side quest in a bath, and he had a vision of the Infinity Stones and their machinations being somehow tied towards something. So really, that's what led to the theories. It's not that Thanos had a build-up, it's that the Infinity Stones did. And so as fans, we were able to piece together what the story of Infinity War might be based on the locations of the Infinity Stones that we knew about. So I do concede that we had more of a build-up in that sense. To this point, the only build-up that we have had for Doctor Doom is that in the Fantastic Four First Steps, when they're at the United Nations, it pans to a placard that says Latveria, which from the comics, that's where Doctor Doom lives, and that seat is empty, suggesting that somebody from Latveria did not show up to this United Nations panel. And then in the post-credit scene, we see that somebody in a green hood with a metal mask is kneeling in front of Franklin Richards. We don't know that that's Doctor Doom, although that is heavily implied. It's like a 99% chance that that is Doctor Doom, but we didn't see that character's face for sure. And really, that's all we've had for Doctor Doom. So it really is not much of a build-up. We might be able to piece together what his plan might be based on phases 4 and 5 of the MCU, but still we're not totally sure. So that's my review of Avengers Infinity War. What do you think of this movie, and how do you think it may connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. Follow Movie Marathons HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all of the movie marathons we've got going on right now. The next movie in this marathon is Ant-Man and the Wasp. See you at the movies!